Hey, this is Ranger Naomi coming to you from Brooks Camp in Katmai National Park, Alaska, and I'm here with
Ranger Nick.
And we're here today to talk about bear management. Sounds like an oxymoron to me. I'm not sure I know how to manage bears. Today's chat will be about a half an hour. It's recorded, so we will get your questions later and answer them. Right now, we are in campsite, which you guys never get to see on the camps. So, and this is where bear management takes place. So, how do you manage bears, Nick?
So, we manage bears by keeping them out of camp, because the more time they spend in camp, the more likely they are to interact with people, get food from people, cause property damage. Bears can be pretty destructive, and they like to chew on things.
Yes, I think some of the camp viewers have seen that in previous years.
Right, and on the cams, people have seen the bears getting in boats and chewing on seat cushions and things like that. People have left out there in the boats, and so anything left out, here is a bear chew toy, potentially.
So it's your responsibility in camp to make sure that doesn't happen? Exactly.
Yep. So what we do is we'll patrol camp, we'll look for things that a bear might find interesting, mostly it's unattended property. And so we try to get there before a bear gets there. Also, we have very strict rules on, where you can eat here. And because we don't want people dropping crumbs around, and we don't want people leaving food or backpacks that have food in them around. And so those kind of things. And so if bears learn to associate people with food, they'll repeat that behavior as far as getting food from people. Even though they have lots of salmon to feed on, they're always looking for novel things to eat. Like bears will even come into camp and they'll graze on grass in July. And so they like a balanced diet. They get different nutrients and that type of thing. And so, and then other things like with all the people we have here and all the bears, we just have a lot of potential for conflicts. And in the past, you look at the history of this place, sporadically bears have broken into the buildings and gotten into garbage when we didn't have good garbage storage and disposal, and also slash tents at the campground.
Ooh, that's not good.
Was pretty common back in the 70s through the 90s before the electric fence was put up there. And so, we want to try to make it so bears and people can coexist here without there being much problems.
So, I see bear management mainly in camp.
Right.
Why is that? Why is it mainly here and not elsewhere at Brooks?
Right. So it's mainly in camp because we have the buildings here. We don't want the bears to destroy camp, and this is where we spend the most time, like visitors and park service and lodge staff, and it's where people, we have food and we have our garbage and so all those things where we sleep, and the campground is just outside of camp. So this is where we have the most potential for issues.
Now, when is it that bears come into camp?
So bears will come into camp pretty much anytime they want.
Yeah.
And but typically our busy season with camp is on the cams when you see bears, on the river fishing, it's in July and September is our busy time, and then in August we get a break. There's still been bears that have been hanging around here in August, but it's not like July, and July is really challenging. Just with we might get up to 400 visitors in a day, and then we'll have bears running around camp and chasing each other, and it gets really hard to manage.
Yeah, I remember that day when we had the gang of 7 subadults, those teenagers, and
Right.
And were you there for that one?
I do remember one where 132 and Cub were following 5 subadults down the beach, and it was a lot of bears.
So so bear management must involve people management, right?
Right.
So what's involved with that?
Right. So bears, bears are going to respond to what we are doing. They're very adaptive, and so if we left food out for the bears, they would come every day and get that food. We could train them to get food, but we don't want to do that. And so, as far as keeping bears from associating people with food, it's it can be a challenge. But what was your?
Well, it's about people.
People. So
how do you manage the people?
Yeah. So we also will monitor bears around people. So, on the beach especially is where bears, we allow the bears to use the beach where the planes land as a travel corridor to the river, and to go down towards the campground, that area. They'll go back and forth, and so we'll manage the people through crowd management, moving the people back from bears, and making sure they don't approach them within 50 yards. We don't want the bears to habituate to people at really close distances, and and to have interactions with people. We want to limit those encounters they have with people.
Often other rangers get involved in these situations with the people management. There was an instance this summer where Bear 171, who was a little problematic for the bear management team this year, and she at the time had 2 spring cubs, and she treed herself and both her spring cubs behind the lodge, and there were a lot of people around, and I was eating lunch inside, and I heard one of the other bear management techs, Carl, having issues with this bear and her cubs and trying to protect her. And so I came out and helped him manage the people. And he really was monitoring the bear up in the tree and checking for her well-being. But I had the really tough job of managing the people who really wanted to take pictures of this bear and her 2 young cubs. So sometimes we get enlisted in this too. I don't know if you Bear Cam viewers have heard the term hazing, but it's a term used frequently by bear management team. And can you describe what hazing is, and maybe some different techniques of hazing you could show our cam viewers?
Right. So the one, I might have mentioned it before, but the one place we keep bears out is camp, and we have a boundary around camp. So we want that to be a bear-free zone, but the bears don't always allow us to do that.
They're not obeying your orders?
Right. But so what we'll do, someone on the radio will call out bear in camp at auditorium, and so then we'll hear it on the radio. We'll run out there, and we'll assess the situation. We'll see, how many bears are there? Is the bear stressed, jaw popping or yawning? Where are the people? Usually when there's a bear in camp, people, they want to take pictures and get close, and so
which is the exact opposite of what we want people to do.
Right. And so when I haze a bear, I'll move people away, and I'll usually position myself behind the bear, because that's where bears they feel more vulnerable. They're easier to move. And then, I'll be the more dominant bear towards that bear, and I'll kind of posture, I'll make myself look big, and I'll kind of speak in a low tone voice at the bear, and I might clap a little bit, scuff my feet, and usually doing that, most of the time, that we can get the bears to move. and get out of camp. And once they get out of camp, we don't bother them anymore.
So they really are on their own most of the time outside of camp?
Yes. And some learn that right outside of camp is a nice place to be. They learn the boundaries, and they eventually, we train them to learn the boundaries almost. And but they'll use camp, they'll cut through camp. Like earlier, we had a bear when we were setting up the camera. Right. We had a bear coming right towards us, towards camp, and
wouldn't wait for the camera to turn on.
And I kind of postured with it and yelled at it, and then it went down the cultural trail, and then it tried to come into camp over there. So likely it was just trying to cut through camp.
We've seen that on the trail to the falls, where that trail is an easy way for us to get to the falls and an easy way for the bears to get to the falls. They like to take those easy routes, and they have a couple things on their mind, mainly eating.
Right. And the other big thing is subadults and females with cubs. They use camp as kind of like a human shield against adult males, because adult males don't like to be in camp or near people as much. So they kind of use us a little bit, and that's another reason why we'll get bears that come out and hang out in camp. And so we rarely see 856 down here, 747.
I think that's
all
a good
the big
thing.
Guys. The only time we see them is typically in the mating season, when they're following a lone adult female, and she'll bring them through camp, and 856 especially, he does not like it. He huffs, and he does not like her bringing him through camp, and he feels very uncomfortable around people in camp.
Has anyone ever tried to manage 856? 856, no. For those of you who don't know, is our most dominant bear. He is a big boar, not a bear you want to mess with.
Right.
So, you did have to haze number 32 Chunk this year?
Yeah.
Number 32 Chunk is a very large bear, and he showed up this year pretty early, and
right.
He showed up in camp, and I believe was chewing the porch on a cabin.
Right, and somebody got a video of it and was woken up at midnight, and they walked out, and there he is on his back chewing on the just the leg of the cabin. And so early season he was around a lot, and of all the adult males, 32 is probably the most comfortable, in camp and around people, as far as my observations. Yeah, and so with the few times that 32 was in camp, I kind of monitored him. I didn't move him, but there was a time when he was following a female with cubs on the beach, and they came through camp, and just for safety reasons, I kind of broke up that interaction, and he pushed him out of camp. And so even though he's like 4 times the size of me, 5 times the size of me,
yeah,
the bears are still, they still see us as dominant, for whatever reason. It's amazing that happens. But when I was in Florida, we got a picture of a house cat treating a 250-pound bear, black bear.
Black bears.
And
yeah.
so that's an example of, bears don't always just see size as, a reason to move out of the way.
Well, I think we see that at the falls with hierarchy, right? Because it's not necessarily the biggest bear that is the most dominant bear. It's about attitude and other bears understanding that bear is not someone to tangle with. And I guess a lot of the bears around here know that you're not someone to tangle with.
Right. And size is definitely part of it. It's part of it, but attitude is another element, like you said.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any particular bears that you look out for that are difficult to haze?
Right. So our biggest challenge this year was 171 and her cubs. And, so the cubs were, when they walk the beach pretty much every day, multiple times, they get up on the floats of the plane and they discovered these rubber float balls that the pilots will take out to get the water out of their floats.
Sounds like
plane.
a good toy to me.
Yeah, and you know, and they so they go to every single floats, you know, on a plane, and they get the float balls, chew on them, they run to the next, and so we get behind them and we'd be hazing them off the floats of the plane each time. And you know, in July we might have up to 40 planes on the beach.
Wow.
So, you know, we did a lot of hazing of them, and they then were getting on the porches, you know, in camp here. And one time in the evening, they got up on the lodge porch, and there's people on the porch. The Cubs just ran up on the porch, and so I told everybody to get inside, and I threw some rocks down on the porch, and they ran off the porch. So we're just really concerned that they were going to get into, you know, bags and things that people leave on the porch. And
the porch, for those of you who don't know and haven't been here, the porch of the lodge is a staging area for their planes, and so people have luggage on there. It's probably the only place in camp where people's belongings are outside. So it's not a place we want bears at all.
Right.
So so 171 was a challenge this year. For those of you who've watched the camps for a while, and you remember 128 Grazer had a couple years ago had cubs, and 128 was very aggressive towards other bears. When she had those cubs, she would challenge 856 and 747, our biggest and most dominant bears. So when I was coming here, I was thinking, boy, that's one bear I don't want to meet on a trail with cubs. But tell us what 128 was like when she had cubs.
So when I was here 2 years ago, she had the 3 yearling cubs, and she was actually pretty easy to move out of camp, and pretty, you know, didn't give us many issues.
That's surprising.
Yeah, and but I can remember one encounter I had with her. I was with a group of people down at Generator Trail, and she was being followed by an adult male on the beach. She saw us in camp and decided to run towards us, and everyone thought she was charging us, but she actually just ran a little past us. She put the group of people between her and the adult male to break up the interaction, and the adult male just continued down the beach.
That makes a lot of sense, because frequently we see family groups around here using this place as protection.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they want to stay away from those big guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Even with like many of the females, 435.
That's Holly, for those of you who used to calling her that.
708.
Yes, who's here with 2 spring cubs this year. She was here a lot, right?
Yes, and you know, 171, but treating the bears in or near camp, and then, you know, going to fish the river, and almost like having us babysit the cubs. They learn that we keep the bears out of this area, so they know that it's a safe place to put their cubs. And so they're just, you know, bears are extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
And you know, able to use us even to their advantage.
I think that's a good thing. So are there bears who you can't haze? Or are very difficult to haze?
Yes. So there's some bears. So the more a bear has been hazed, the more it habituates to that hazing. It slowly learns that we're not going to hurt them, and so they just decide they're not going to move when we go after them. So we have to continually escalate our hazing techniques that go from posturing and making noise to noisemakers. They're like potentially air horns or sticks that you may have seen on the cams by the boats.
Yeah, we have a couple of rangers here who use these sticks not to hit the bears, but to make loud noises and intimidate them. So some are more difficult to haze. What about sleeping bears?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a good example of a bear who was both difficult to haze and slept a lot. Bear 410, who is no longer with us. She was came here last year for a couple of days in June, and she was 29 years old. So we think she's in that big salmon bar in the sky. But she was a bear that liked to sleep a lot and didn't like to move, right? You want to talk a little bit about managing 410?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to be here 2 years ago when 410 was still around. She came in the fall, and she would under the old ramp that you go up to the lower platform. She'd sleep right underneath it, and a lot of times people didn't even know she was there, and they're walking right over her, and she wouldn't even wake up. She was so habituated to people and used to people. Now, as far as once we did know she was there, we would close everything down, and people couldn't get near her, within 50 yards. But so she definitely presented some issues, and if she's there long enough, and we may decide to move her, unfortunately. But usually we if we can, we walk around the bears. We try to disturb them as little as possible. And I really, outside of camp, I really don't like hazing the bears, and the bears tend to learn, like, this is where we haze them. And outside of camp, if we decide to do that for any reason, they're very difficult to move, because they know that we just don't do that out there.
So they're saying, well, why are you doing this to me here? That you're supposed to do that over there, not where I am now. So for any of you coming to Brooks Camp in the future, hazing is not something we recommend for visitors. We like our bear management. We other rangers don't like to haze at all. We like to leave it to the professionals. So I have a question. People have heard about bear spray.
Yep.
And as an effective technique for recalcitrant bears. And we as rangers do carry bear spray. You can't see that down there, but here's my bear spray. I have yet to have to use it, but Nick, maybe you can talk a little bit about the use of bear spray and maybe give us a demonstration.
Sure. Yeah, so bear spray is a very effective tool to use to deter bears. And so the reason is it has capsaicin in it, which is a component of hot peppers. And bears, as many of us know, they smell really good. They can smell up to 5 to 7 times better than a dog. And so there's incredible sense of smell, and so that their nose is very sensitive. And so when bear spray is used, it will irritate their eyes and their nose, also ours, if the wind is right.
Or wrong.
Right. But so but it's used, when a bear is charging, and a bear comes within 30 feet. So it's very close range. 30 feet is how far the spray will go out. And it goes out in a cone and kind of spreads out. Pepper spray, in comparison, would come out in a straight line, and that would be for people,
Right.
And and so bear spray is just for bears, and also the times when it's been used here, I can remember are when bears have approached people, especially subadults that get curious and that type of thing, and get a little too close.
Yeah,
some people have used it on subadults here.
I've never used my bear spray, but the only times I've taken out my bear spray is when a subadult has actually followed me off the trail and been within a few feet. And when initial hazing hasn't worked, I then take out the bear spray, and then I try more insistent hazing. Right. And then if that didn't work, then I would use the bear spray. I haven't had to use it yet. And one thing I like to tell visitors who bring bear spray here, we do not give out bear spray here, and we do not sell it. but I like to tell them they may think that this is something to protect them against the big boars, but the big boars are actually less interested in us.
Right.
It's really the subadults who are very curious and really want to play, who might get too close, and playing one swat from a subadult would not be too good. You want to demonstrate use of bear
Sure.
spray on the audience?
Yeah, sure. So usually you have it in a holster, and you want to practice taking it out. You want to, because it's going to be quick if a bear's charging you, especially. And so you pull it out and you hold it with your left hand like that, and then you press down. And you want to aim low, because when a bear's coming towards you, its head's going to be low, and the spray
Right,
might
they put
lift
their
a
heads
little
down
bit.
to attack, right? They sort of.
Yeah, when
Well-
they're charging, usually their head is down, and also just bears are lower to the ground in general. They're on all four.
So you want to do that one more time, a little higher, and we
Sure.
get one more demonstration so that I know you like to aim low, but with our camera angle,
Sure.
let's bring that up. Okay, you've been sprayed. Don't harass us.
Right, and so, and there is a debate as far as bear spray and guns, as far as what you want to take in bear country. Now, a lot of times when bears are shot for charging, it was probably unnecessary, and so, bears, will rarely complete that charge. Sometimes they do. Maybe it's because the bear's really close, and there's not much time for it to stop. Or maybe it's just there's a certain situation as far as what someone finds themselves in. But bear spray is. I think bear spray is a more effective deterrent. It's not going to harm the bear. It's going to keep the bear away from you. And that's the goal.
And as far as visitor management of bears, if you really listen to what you hear from rangers, and you keep your distance and you watch bears' behaviors, bear spray is really not necessary for visitors, but it is for bear management. Is there anything else you want to tell us about bear management and bears, Nick?
One thing I'd like to mention is just, the bears here, they are habituated to people. And one of the reasons for that, so bears, when they come to a salmon stream and there's other bears, they interact with other bears. They learn to tolerate other bears at close range, and therefore they habituate to it. And interesting thing about bears is that habituation, bear-to-bear habituation, seems to facilitate bear-to-human habituation, where they tolerate us. Like, if we saw a plane fly by for the first time, it might scare us. We don't know if it's going to hurt us. But after the 100th one, we might just go about our business like it's not even there.
Like we're doing now with the plane that's
Right.
in here. Right.
And that's how they behave around us a lot of times. A lot of the bears, they go about their business like we're not even here. And so that's one thing you might see on the cams as far as the bears walking by people and in the river and not really paying much attention to them.
So I want to thank Ranger Nick for a really wonderful chat about bear management. I learned a lot, and I have learned a lot being here with the bear management team this year. We're going to conclude the chat now because this is recorded. Questions, you can, if you have questions, please type them on the live chat channel, and the Explore team will collect those and send them to us, and we will answer them for you. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ranger Naomi.
I'm Ranger Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks.